Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Soul Focused Radio. This is your host, Martin Teddy Bear Moses Friedman, and I'm really excited to be joined by Nicole Auffant, one of our facilitators and trainers with Soul Focus Group. Hey, Nicole, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm well. I'm happy to be here.
It's exciting. How's life in Jersey today?
Life is good. It's such a beautiful day out. We have, warm weather. It's in the 70s,
Yeah.
and there's still some snow that's melting. So it's funny to see
Wow.
that. But I love spring, right? And spring is coming because there's so much potential, I think, in the air with the renewed life. So I love it.
Beautiful, beautiful. And, we're all coming up. I think for most of us, we're coming up on the year anniversary of COVID. Not that COVID wasn't around before then, but I think the date for me when I came off the road was March 13th. So we're coming up on those anniversaries of quarantine and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. My daughter told me the other day that it will be a year, and I forget which day exactly, but that we've been she said, since lockdown, since the original lockdown here in New
Right,
Jersey.
right.
And it's insane. I remember back then, thinking, okay, 2 weeks, right? We can do this for 2 weeks. That's
Mm,
fine. And, we are a family of introverts. So
mhm.
it wasn't scary to us, the idea of not being in touch with others. But I remember back then thinking about it lasting longer. Like once we went beyond the 2 weeks and the sadness that I felt
Mm.
thinking like, oh, we might be like this till the fall. And so I remember consciously thinking, oh, I need to just do this day by day. And because as soon as I think like we may be here in September still, I had a hard time dealing with that. So it's amazing to think like, well, it's been a year and, we have survived and we're lucky for that. So I'm grateful.
Absolutely. Me too. Me too. And now people are talking about hopefully everything being all the way open by this next September, right? Which is just amazing. I remember the feeling the same way. Like, I know I'll be back on the road in May or June. That's what I remember thinking last March. And, here it is. I've been out a few times, to travel to do some in-person trainings, but really it's just the shift in life in this last year has been incredible. Just absolutely incredible.
Absolutely. Mhm.
Yeah. So, the purpose of this really is, just to get to know you a little bit, to share with our listeners of Soul Focus Radio who you are. Hopefully, a lot of them will be coming to our virtual workshops and then someday soon in person workshops, and we'll get to meet you. And this gives them an opportunity to just kind of get an idea of who you are. And, as I've said on many of our previous podcasts, at Soul Focus Group, we kind of talk about the difference between who we are and what we are. And I want to start with the what you are. So just tell us like what you are in terms of what do you do and give us a little bit of your backstory. Let's start there.
Yeah, so I am. It's funny because I struggle with the who I am, but I also struggle with the what I am.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a student for a long time, so that is kind of central to my identity. I am finishing up my PhD this term. I defend my dissertation actually in a little over a week. So
Wow.
yeah, so that's been a big part of my identity. And so I am in a program called Urban Systems at Rutgers University in Newark. And
Mm.
my research specifically, so there's different tracks in my program, and I am on an educational policy track. And my research looks at how school policies and practices and the curriculum kind of perpetuate, rape culture is really
Mm.
what I look at. So I work with young women in high school to explore that, right? To explore the meanings that they're making of the policies and the curriculum within their schools
Mm.
and how they experience that, right? How they feel oppressed by some of the messages they're receiving. And so I also do, I'm a facilitator with Soul Focus Group. So I'm doing, anti-racist trainings and organizing around the country. But in New Jersey, locally, I work with other folks around organizing around, anti-racist principles. This past year in COVID, I've also been working with mutual aid groups, and we started a mutual aid group here in the city I live in Newark, New Jersey. And, the premise of that was we recognized that there was a need for folks to have access to food. So, our county and our city was doing a lot to get people groceries, but you had to like drive up to these parks to pick up grocery boxes. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of folks in our community who don't drive, or there are folks who are undocumented and don't necessarily feel comfortable, engaging the state in that way, right? So we provide a service where you can contact us, give us a grocery list, and we'll send out folks to do your shopping and deliver them to your door. So that's been really fulfilling, because I think early on in the pandemic, a lot of people, or at least for me, wanted to know, what can I do, right? What can I do to support my community and to help, especially because, I saw all the pain that my community was experiencing. We had high numbers of cases in our community and high numbers of deaths. So it was really important for me to do that.
Nice.
That's a bit of my organizing work. Mm-hmm. I'm also a mom. I have a 22-year-old. He'll be 23 in a couple weeks, and a 16-year-old daughter. And I think, going along with a mom, I always will identify as a teen mom, although I'm far from my teen years. That's such a big part of who I am and what's shaped who I've become. So that's always important for me to center. This might be more than the what, but I'm also a, Puerto Rican woman, and living in a primarily Black and Latinx community. So, again, that's something that really shapes just my perspective in the world.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I always have to tell people it's not a perfect process of, who and what, or, we are who we are. And I think part of the whole thing is that the world has sort of gotten us mixed up too in the who's and the what. So I'm always just curious what people's answers are, and for me, the who is just sort of our essence. What would you describe? What's the essence of Nicole Auffant at the, at the core of who you are? How would you define that?
Love and compassion. It's something like I just know that that's who I am. Just this, just extreme love and compassion that sometimes it overwhelms me. My empathy, right? My ability, I'm such an empath. And that has been, it's been amazing. And I think it's opened a lot of doors for me, but it's also been a cause of a lot of pain for me. So I'm learning to embrace that more and to see the strength in it, because I think growing up, I somewhere, somehow, and maybe probably in multiple places, received the message that that was weakness, right? The empathy and the compassion that I felt for others is a weakness, and I would get walked all over, or whatever, the narratives are about people who can feel others, joy and pain. And yeah, I got the message it wasn't good to be that. And I think there was a time in my life I tried to disconnect from that feeling, from all the feelings. And I'm learning now to really embrace that and see that as a huge strength. And it's funny because I'm a very introverted person, as I mentioned, and I don't necessarily I don't have a lot of friends. I'm not good at staying in touch with people and being social. That is not my thing. I don't want to go out for coffee on the weekend with anyone, but it doesn't mean I don't feel connected to people. It doesn't mean I don't want to ever be around people. So I was just thinking yesterday, actually, I before COVID times, I was running with a local running group, and I loved going to the group runs and just hanging out. I mean, you kind of fall into your pace group, And I love just hanging out in the group and listening to everyone talk. And you could hear, I mean, these like people love to talk to one another and catch up. And I just wanted to just run and listen and be in their presence. And I felt so fulfilled by that.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of like going and talking myself is just not something that I want to do. But
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. I'm learning that's okay. That it doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. So, and seeing my ability to empathize with others as, I don't know, a super strength almost, right? I am so in tune with
Yeah.
other people's what they're what they're feeling or their emotions. And sometimes it's on it's I can't put words to it, right? It's just a feeling in my body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think back to the like grade school playground, which my school was a concrete, playground, and seeing a student from another grade fall, and no one saw him. I thought, but me, right? No one came. No aid came to his rescue or anything, and I just remember as a kid, I must have been in like third or fourth grade, feeling so awful for him, right? Feeling like, oh, I just felt like I felt his pain. And in my child mind thinking, what's wrong with me, right? Like something's wrong with me and I'm
Mm-hmm.
backward. And now sometimes as an adult, I look at how we treat each other in this world and think, what's wrong with them, right? Like, what is wrong? What
Mm-hmm.
has, our world done to us to keep us disconnected from one another's humanity? And that's it, right? I feel so connected to humanity and to life. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, that you would be working now with Soul Focus Group, right? Because everything we talk about is a return to human solidarity with
Yeah.
all of these forces that have been designed to keep us separate. I find it fascinating the concept of, and I think you did a good job of describing it, but the concept of being both an introvert and an empath simultaneously, right? Because when you think of somebody who's very empathic or very empathetic, you think of somebody that's constantly like in relationship with other humans. And I think you really, the way you laid that out, I thought was really fascinating to sort of exist in both of those places at the same time. In some ways, they can seem contradictory, but I think the way you laid it out really makes a lot of sense.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad I make sense. I guess. But yeah, we're such a, we tend to think in such dichotomous ways, right? Like these two can't coexist. And then if they do, as individuals, we make that to mean like something's wrong with us, right? Or we don't make sense. And so, yeah, I think, and self focus has definitely helped me with this, just to recognize that we're all complex, right? And there isn't one way to be in this world and one way to experience, and to honor that, right? To honor that in myself, because I would honor that in anyone else and see the beauty in that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so much of it is us being able to see ourselves in other people. And I think that's why having those empathetic abilities are so powerful for what you do. Because, I think for me, also feeling pretty empathetic and pretty, highly sensitive as a person, I believe that it helps me because I can see myself in almost everybody else. You know, whatever, the old saying, there but for the grace of God go I. For me, it's there but for the grace of fill in the blank go I,
Mhm.
right? I don't feel like there's any person or situation that I couldn't have potentially been. And I think that has a lot of the empatheticness in its roots.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to explore a little bit more of what you talked about in terms of your doctoral thesis that you're defending. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you came to do that? I think it's a pretty fascinating subject. What inspired you to sort of take you down that road, and just tell us a little bit more, if you could.
Yeah. So I remember, so I guess I have this like feminist identity.
Hmm.
I remember being, I don't even remember how old I was or what year it was, but my brother used to get Sports Illustrated. And I remember Anna
Hmm.
Kournikova, the tennis player, was on the cover one year. or 1 week.
Right.
And I read the article, and she was a beautiful woman. I didn't know much about tennis, but there was a local program that I was in. We got free tennis lessons. So I was interested enough. I read the article, and I remember being so angry that her looks were the center of this article. I mean, that was
Mhm.
all it was about. And then I found out like she wasn't even that good, right?
That's
But
right.
it just centered her beauty, and I was pissed off. And my father suggested that I should write a letter to the editors, um, and I didn't. But that I think about that sometimes with my own work, right? That this has always been something that I cared about passionately, like how women are portrayed and how the stereotypes are perpetuated, and in this case through media and the narrative, right, in the discourse. And then my mom, I don't remember why she would tell me this story, but she would frequently tell me about how at her job, and in the 70s and 80s, women were required to wear skirts and dresses.
Mm.
And I just remember thinking, like, that's just crazy, right?
Mm.
And my mom hated it. And my mom she wasn't someone that I imagined, right? Like enjoying going to work, dressing up, right? She just wasn't that
Right.
person. So after I had both my children, I went back to college,
Mhm.
and I majored in sociology and women's and gender studies. So I double majored. Going into my senior or my final year, I was invited to apply for this honors thesis program. So I was thinking about it, and I wasn't sure, well, what would I had to write in my application what I would study. So I wasn't sure. And of course, like, this is another story, but like the imposter syndrome, all that came up. Like, can I actually do this? Do I really belong there? And as I said, my kids were in grade school at this time, and their school would send home these monthly newsletters. And
Mhm.
so during this time, one of the kids came home with a monthly newsletter, and there was a picture in it. And I wish I could find this picture, but it was the students, and I think they were fifth grade students, out on the playground doing a science experiment. And this school has a uniform requirement. And at the time, this isn't true any longer, but at the time, girls were required to wear skirts.
Mhm.
And in this picture, it was a young boy and a young girl, and the experiment they were doing was happening on the ground. And you could see in the picture, the boy was just down on the ground, like his face in the experiment, right? Like looking as
Mhm.
closely
Mhm.
as he could. And you could see the female student, the girl was, squatting down. Her skirt was pulled over her knees, and she just, to me anyway, looked uncomfortable in the photo.
Mhm.
And I was so amazed about how discomfort, right, can be communicated through the photo. And it made me wonder, well, is she consciously thinking about covering her knees, or is she constantly thinking about, consciously thinking about making sure her knees were together, her legs were closed, right? So when she squats
Mhm.
down, and taking up less space, because she was physically taking up less space than the boy next to her. And so I thought then, like, that's it. That's the study I have to do. I need to explore what these students are experiencing, these female students that are being required to wear a skirt. And so that's what I did this was an undergraduate honors thesis. I interviewed third and fifth graders about their experiences being required to wear a skirt. And I also talked to their teachers and administrators, why they felt it was needed in that school, looking at the history of putting students in uniforms, and even, thinking about what the Native American boarding schools, right? This idea that
Mm-hmm.
we have to, get people to conform to a certain way, right? To look a certain way because that's what's respectable. And so that work really inspired my current work. That inspired
Mm-hmm.
me. At the time, I thought I was going to law school after finishing college. And I had to, for my honors thesis, I had to present it to my department. And a friend who was a PhD student at the time came to my presentation. And afterwards, she said to me, "You don't want to go to law school. You want to get your PhD." And I remember being so angry at her because I was like, what do you mean? This is what I'm doing. And then after sitting with that for a little while, I realized
Mm-hmm.
this work, I don't want it to stop here, right? The exploration of young girls' experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
um, and so that led me, I guess, to the PhD program. Sorry, that was a long way to get to.
No, don't be sorry at all. Mm-hmm.
But then I think for my research, it's deeply personal, right? I think about the experiences I had in school myself as someone who identifies as female. In seventh grade, my mother worked for the school that I was in, and teachers pulled her aside and asked her if she would take me to get a breast reduction.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it was like seventh grade, I was 12. And just how that, the objectification that I experienced in school, and that I saw my friends, my female friends experience. There's a lot of stories. And then, I said I was a teen mom. My pregnant body literally was something that was, objectified or deemed inappropriate for this space. So I became interested in exploring more, how this happens, right? What are the other ways that schools as an institution send messages about what's appropriate and what's inappropriate? And then I think what my work ultimately is is thinking about how we make certain people invisible in schools. And I want to be clear, it's not just girls that we do this to. There's, for many different reasons, there's all types of groups, and I think there's a lot of work on the treatment or mistreatment of Black boys in school.
Mm-hmm.
But you know through the sexualization of and objectification of girls, and particularly girls of color, there's really this promotion of invisibility
Mm-hmm.
within schools. And
Mm-hmm.
invisibility is really painful, I think, in my experience, right? To be made to feel invisible is a really violent thing.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And absolutely, never any apologies necessary. I mean, you appreciate, how you laid it out, and I think for we're going to wrap up this part one in just a minute, and have some more questions for you for part two. I'm really interested in do all the research that you've done, and I really hear a strong like personal emotional connection to it. It's not just a intellectual academic exercise for you. What are you seeing as the way out for us, and how does that connect to soul focus group technology? How are you seeing us getting out of this problem that has been put on us by patriarchy and racism?
Yeah. So thank you for that, for all
Mhm.
these questions, right? Because we live in the world and we don't really think about why or the how of our experiences. But, healing is central, and then that's so connected to soul focus group, right? Like we need to heal from our experiences and the way we've been treating each other, and the even generational effects that's had. And for me, part of that is, it's living and leading, or led, like be my life being led by love and compassion. And the other part of that, I think, is a constant reflection and self-reflection. Why do I think that this is the standard, right? Who told me that this is the standard? Where did that come from? So being curious about those things that I hold myself to, right? And realizing that those narratives that we've been sold or told are not necessarily true. And for me, that's a big part of that is like forgiving myself, or being
Mhm.
more gentle with myself, because we are so hard on ourselves, all of us, and hold ourselves to these standards that have been imposed upon us in a way to keep us down.
Mhm.
So that's where I see like love and gentleness with ourselves and one another is so important to this work. The other thing I think is feeling connected to ourselves first, like our own bodies. I see us as so disconnected from our body. And I think that keeps us in this, it keeps us from being able to heal, right? And I see our disconnection from our own body as part of the disconnection that we have from one another, right? Or the disconnection that we have from our planet and
Mhm.
animals, right? Like we can mistreat so much of life because we don't even have a deep connection with our own, living body. And so I really believe that finding a way to connect people to their own bodies is the first step or one part of doing the healing work. And I didn't talk about it, but I think fitness is another thing that I don't want to say fitness, but movement is another
Mhm.
thing
Right.
that is really, I guess, dear to me. And that's because
Mhm.
it's not something, I was a terrible athlete at everything my whole life.
Mhm.
And so because
Mhm.
I was a bad athlete, I thought, oh, then I'm bad at movement. And so it wasn't something that I think really embraced until I got to graduate school. But it helped me connect to my body and connect to my strength and connect to also feeling, right? There were parts of my body and like that I couldn't feel. So if someone said, oh, like tighten this muscle, I could not do it because I just had no
Mhm.
connection. And so, like movement and meditation and just practicing being present has really helped me and helped me move forward on my healing path. And that having more compassion for myself has allowed me to have that for others, right? And to want others to connect to their own bodies in the way that in the way that I've now been able to with mine.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, that's awesome. I've really appreciated, I've definitely gotten to know you over the last couple of years. And, I really appreciate getting to know you in this way, and appreciate how honest and open you've been with our listeners. So thank you for that. And we're gonna record a part two in just a minute. So I want to thank you, Nicole, for sharing so much.
Oh, thank you, Martin. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you. And we appreciate all of you, our Soul Focused Radio listeners. You know we do. You know we appreciate you and love you. And we want you to be a part of the journey with all of us and all the different kinds of journeys that we're on. In order to do that, come visit us at soulfocusedgroup.com. Listen to our podcast on all the different platforms, the Apple platform, Android, Spotify, Google. Check us out everywhere. Check us out on YouTube. We're getting more and more content on YouTube every day. And we ask that you stay safe and stay sane, whatever that means to you. Stay well. And most of all, we ask that you stay soul focused.
If you wish to support and represent the Soul Focus Group, check out our apparel store at our website, www.soulfocusedgroup.com/shop.